This is lesson 4, and we'll be talking about another new phylum in this lesson, phylum Cnidaria. So what is a cnidarian? The definition is a soft-bodied carnivorous animal that has cnidocytes arranged in circles around their mouths. They are the simplest animals to have body symmetry and specialized tissues. Carnivorous means meat-eating, and cnidocytes are stinging cells. And remember, the red underlined parts go in your notes. So that's quite the definition, and there are probably a couple of words in there that you might not know the definition of. So let's talk about it. But first, let's look at some examples of what cnidarians are. This is called a hydra. This is the main hydra right here. It's asexually reproducing. It's producing a bud right here. So it soon will be 2 hydra. This is a jellyfish. This is the Portuguese man-of-war. It's quite an infamous cnidarian. It's actually not a jellyfish. It's a collection of hydra, of those little hydra animals we saw in the first picture. But it is poisonous to humans and can be deadly. That's an example of a very large jellyfish. Here are some pretty moon jellies. This is a sea anemone, which is also a cnidarian. Here's another sea anemone, and here are some clownfish. So like on Finding Nemo, Nemo and his dad live in a sea anemone. This is coral, also an example of a cnidarian. Each of these little animals right here are individual cnidarians, and they work together to build their coral home. This is brain coral, another example of coral, and if we were to zoom in really close, we'd see individual little polyps along these ridges making this coral. So let's talk about cnidocytes. Cnidocytes are one of the defining characteristics of cnidarians, and it's where cnidarians get their name. Cnidocytes are stinging cells. So cnido, the C is silent, just like in cnidarians, means stinging, and cyte means cells. So cnidocytes are stinging cells. The cell contains a nematocyst. And also of note, cnidarians are named for these cnidocytes. So cnidarians literally means stinging or stinger, and cnidocytes are the stinging cells that they have. So cnidocytes are the cells, and inside the cells are nematocysts. And a nematocyst is a poison-filled stinging structure that contains a tightly coiled dart. And when a predator or a meal brushes up against the cnidarian's tentacles, which is where the cnidocytes are located, thousands of nematocysts explode into the animal, releasing poison to paralyze or to kill. So this is a picture of cnidocytes. Lots of them reside all along the tentacles. The cnidocyte is the cell, and then the nematocyst is this little poison-filled dart inside. This is a scanning electron micrograph of a nematocyst. So this is the dart. You can see the barbs on it. This is what grabs on to the prey or onto the predator, and this is what grabs on and holds it into its tentacles. This is just another depiction of a cnidocyte. So this entire thing is called a cnidocyte. When a prey or predator brushes up against the trigger here, the nematocyst is released into the predator or prey. So cnidarians are radially symmetrical. What does this mean? So think of objects that are radially symmetrical, and probably the easiest example is a tire. Any way you cut this wheel, any way you cut this tire, the other half is exactly the same. and that's what it means to be radially symmetrical. The same thing goes for this sea star. Any way you cut it, the other half is identical. This is different from sponges who don't have any symmetry, and then humans and other animals that are bilaterally symmetrical, meaning there's only one way you can cut the body in half and have the two sides the same. So cnidarians are radially symmetrical. You can cut them in half any way, and the two parts are the same. Cnidarians have a central mouth surrounded by tentacles. So here's a sea anemone. Here's the mouth right here. And it's surrounded by the tentacles. Cnidarians typically have a life cycle that includes two different looking stages, a medusa and a polyp. So here's a diagram of those. The polyp, the mouth is on the upper surface with the tentacles surrounding the mouth. In the medusa form, the mouth is on the underside of the body with the tentacles surrounding it. So it's almost the same thing, except for one's right side up and the other's upside down, if that makes sense. Polyps live with their mouth upward. Medusa have their mouth downward. In cnidaria, there are several characteristics that cnidarians have that porphyrians don't. And the first is a gastrovascular cavity. This is the digestive chamber with one opening. So this means that some of the digestion happens extracellularly. That means that when a cnidarian pulls prey or food into its mouth, the food begins to be digested outside of the cells in this digestive chamber. The opening is usually called a mouth. It's both a mouth and an anus, though. The food will come in there, and whatever is left will exit the same way. So how is this different from a porphyrin? Porphyrins have intracellular digestion, meaning all digestion happens inside of cells. They also do not have a gastrovascular cavity. So that's an advancement in cnidarians. There's their mouth. So food will come into the mouth. Some of it gets digested in the cavity here, and then whatever's left will exit. The next advancement of cnidarians is a nerve net. A nerve net is a loosely organized network of nerve cells that allow cnidarians to detect stimuli. So here's nerve cells scattered throughout the cnidarian's body. They don't have a brain. There's really no way to coordinate movements, but they do have nerves that allow them to react to their environment. Statocysts. These are a group of cells that help determine the direction of gravity. And this is particularly helpful in jellyfish who are swimming. They can tell which way is up and which way is down thanks to the statocysts. It also helps them maintain balance. Ocelli are very primitive eye spots, and they detect light. They're also used to help cnidarians navigate. And here's a picture of them. They reside along the bell of the jellyfish, along the outer rim of the jellyfish, and they help the jellyfish find the right way to swim in the water. So now we're on to the 7 survival characteristics. Cnidarians capture prey using their tentacles and nematocysts and pull the prey into their mouth and into the gastrovascular cavity. They have extracellular and intracellular digestion, so digestion happens outside of the cells and inside of the cells, and then unused food is passed out of the body through the mouth. Respiration is accomplished by diffusion. So remember that respiration is how the animals obtain oxygen and get rid of carbon dioxide. So what is diffusion? Diffusion is the movement of particles from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. So cnidarians, along with sponges, use the water surrounding their bodies to move carbon dioxide out of their cells and oxygen in. So the concentration of oxygen is higher in the water than it is in the cells, and so the oxygen will naturally move into the cells of the cnidarian, whereas the opposite is true of carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide concentration is higher in the cells than it is in the water, and so the carbon dioxide will naturally move out. This is the same as sponges. So they respirate by diffusion. Circulation is also done by diffusion, so also through the water. They transport nutrients, oxygen, and waste. It's also the same as sponges. Excretion is getting rid of waste. It's also accomplished by diffusion, which is the same as sponges. Now on to response. Again, we talked about this earlier, so we're just going to briefly go through it. They have a nerve net, statocysts, and ocelli. So they have a way to interact with their environment and sense or detect what's going on in the environment. Movement. They use water to propel themselves along if they're in medusa form. So if they're in the jellyfish form with their mouth on the underside, they can use water to propel themselves along. Medusa forms move, but most polyp forms don't. Now on to reproduction. They reproduce asexually by budding. So there's a picture of the hydra with its little bud on it. And they reproduce sexually by releasing gametes into the water. Males and females are separate in cnidarians, which is not true. Say for sponges, you'd have one sponge that produced egg and sperm at the same time, but there are males and females in cnidarians. And that's the end. That's all about cnidarians. So now you get to watch a movie to learn more about cnidarians. And in the next lesson, we'll learn about the different types of cnidarians and how they are classified.